Hello everyone, I want to welcome you to our webinar today, STRAINWISE Consulting. I'm Sean Eubanks, your host. We are going to be discussing a plan. It is how to write and maintaining a sanitary facility plan for your cannabis business. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is the name of the webinar here, presented by STRAINWISE Consulting. Here's my contact information. You guys are welcome to reach out to me, subanks@strainwise.com. Visit me on LinkedIn. Also, another way to contact us directly is to visit strainwiseconsulting.com and submit a request through our contact form. A couple of housekeeping items. Questions are welcome, and I hope to have time for Q&A at the end here. The webinar is not captioned, guys. There are multiple ways for you to download copies that you can rewatch anytime by returning to the link you signed up for. If not, just shoot me an email and I'll send you a link for it. You can visit our STRAINWISE Consulting Facebook page as well, and also see YouTube for a recording of this webinar. And then submit requests for content, guys. If you'd like to see different kinds of content from us, send me an email, subanks@strainwise.com. And then if you would like to sponsor these webinars, please contact me as well. You can see on our Facebook page, sometimes we get up to 60,000 views or more. We boost it through YouTube, and we also have weekly commercials that we'll send out featuring your company and talking about what webinars coming up and what we're doing on the podcast and other media stuff as well that you would get exposure on. So if you're interested in that, give me a call back. We do have 163 slides to get through today, guys, in 1 hour. So I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, but we're going to get through all of it for sure. Please do not reproduce this content and claim it as your own. Also, there are going to be details at the end of this webinar that entitles you to 1 hour of free consulting, so stay tuned for that. All right, so as usual, guys, questions are more than welcome here. I see everyone logged in to through GoToWebinar. I want to welcome you there, and then everyone who's on Facebook Live, welcome you as well. So let's see here. And then as questions pop up, guys, you're welcome to interrupt me throughout the process. I'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, just shoot them through. I'll see them here in the box, and then we'll go from there. So, all right, what we're going to accomplish today, we're going to review an actual maintaining a sanitary facility plan for an application and talk to you about how to write one of these for your cannabis business application. The second thing we're going to do, we're going to recommend that you use this webinar to create your list of actual standard operating procedures for your company, facility, and the opportunity. Please note, we have an extensive standard operating procedures and employee training manual. It's approximately 200 pages and 25,000 words. I cannot cover all that today in an hour, but I'm going to give you as much as I can. I want to thank you in advance for understanding that. A quick reminder, Blunt Business is STRAINWISE Consulting's podcast that we do every week. It is in partnership with Cannabis Radio. They are handling the platform for us and do a tremendous job. We have a lot of great guests on there. If you're interested in the business side of cannabis and how to get in this business and how to profit from it and what to do as far as how to handle hiring a consultant and get the things that you need to do to get going, the podcast is perfect for you. So please tune into that and stay tuned weekly for our announcements. If you want to be added to our database for the announcement of what podcast is coming up this week, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to add you to that. Our sponsor is STRAINWISE Consulting. They are the most sought after consulting company for applications and management contracts in the cannabis industry. They consulted on the very first recreational license in the world. In fact, they consulted on 7 of the first 10, have nearly 100% success rate on all applications submitted, and that's more than 200 applications submitted. 9 brand dispensaries throughout the state of Colorado, 100,000 square feet of cultivation space, and of course they're among the top 5 marijuana companies in Colorado. STRAINWISE is also the consultant of the very first vertically integrated Native American tribe selling cannabis in the United States. All right, so a narrative overview of a typical application. You can see that you have between 30 and 35 different narratives. If you've sat in on our other webinars in the past or you're on the YouTube channel now, you can see there are plenty of places to look up old webinars and look at all of these different narratives. Eventually, we're going to cover the entire application for you. You can see information on diversity plans. There's a cultivation operations plan. Medical storage, labeling, inventory, waste management, diversion prevention plans, another one, pesticide cultivation. Today's focus is just on one narrative, which is maintaining a sanitary facility plan that is a part of every application that you will submit. Okay, so an outline of today's content. We're going to talk about personnel first, then we're going to talk about quarantine of materials and equipment, and then we're going to discuss integrated pest management. Next up is water supply, then indoor air quality, and then hygiene and protective clothing. Then we're going to talk about respirators, a quick stop on equipment calibration, and we're going to discuss workplace-related injuries, lighting hazards, equipment inspection, compressed gas, and emergencies. All right, so that's the outline of today's content, 13 basic topics inside this narrative. So why would you want to write a maintaining a sanitary facility plan? First of all, it's a required narrative for all cultivation applications, both state and local. Second, it helps ease pressure that politicians have from detractors of the program. Third, it outlines for the cannabis companies some of the information that the SOPs contain and should be used as guidance for security and the companies that you hire. Number 4, it's a reminder for you, your partners, and your employees that are ambassadors of cannabis that you are the canna-face of your community. So having a clean running business is very, very important, and having a sanitary facility plan is important as well. If you lose track, remember guys, you're not compliant. If you're not following these plans and all the narratives that you lay out for the state and local municipalities, then you're not compliant, and if you're not compliant, then that means you're out of business. So we want to avoid that. Who's the target audience? In this case, in your state, it could be the Department of Health, Revenue, Tax, etc. It's whoever is tasked with the regulation of managing the cannabis program. In Colorado, we have the Marijuana Enforcement Division, which is Department of Revenue there. The second topic or target here is city planners. And third is the consultants you hire. You're writing this sanitary facility plan to set up, to tell the consultants that you hire to come on and handle your operations, this is how we'd like for it to be done. This is how we want sanitary facility plan to run. Fourth, you're writing this also, it shows your employees that you care about them and their safety, and it gives them important information about what to do in a case of an emergency. Very, very important. All right, so it starts with a directive. When you're writing an application for your state, they're going to come out and say, okay, for example, please provide a summary of the intended sanitation and safety measures to be implemented at your proposed facility and site. These measures should cover, but are not limited to, the following: a written process for contamination prevention, pest protection procedures, medical marijuana handler restrictions, hand washing at the facilities, and inspection schedules to ensure the accuracy of the operational equipment. So this is the directive that will come. On different applications, they vary. Remember, you got state and local. You can have this be very open-ended, or it can be very specific like this, where it says, hey, look, these are sort of a recommendation of the topics you need to cover. So this is where it starts, and then everything that follows on this is an actual submission that we've made on an application, and this is going to be really great content for you. All right, so first off, we start off by saying, look, proper sanitation is vitally important because it touches nearly every aspect of the business. Our company views cleanliness as a kind of insurance policy for our entire operation. A clean facility protects the health and safety of our employees, the quality of our product, and it mitigates the risk of a potential product recall. We're happy and eager to meet the regulatory standards laid out by the state, but even if this were not required, good business sense would require a comprehensive plan for maintaining hygiene. So first thing we're going to discuss is personnel. So we're labeling personnel here, and it says our team combined has a great deal of experience in cultivation of medical marijuana. Our management company, in this case the management company is STRAINWISE Consulting. So we're telling regulators at this point that as a client, we've decided to hire STRAINWISE Consulting, right? So when you look at why you have success in this industry and why people win licenses and why people don't, we believe it's a combination of your business acumen combined with our operational experience at STRAINWISE Consulting. So in this case, in the very beginning, we're talking about personnel, but we're not diving into the personnel exactly of the employees that we're hiring. We're talking about the overall view of where does this start and where does the expertise come from. So our management company operates in a state where marijuana is wholly legal, and we are excited to work with them and benefit from their years of experience. That same company has assisted us with this application and will be with us throughout the start of the operations. Our company fosters a culture of personal responsibility, and every employee is encouraged to be responsible for their workspace. We'll also teach employees to maintain the equipment they use, as well as the need for general tidiness of their workspace. In order to fully manage all cleanliness requirements, we employ a facility manager who supervises the maintenance and cleanliness of our entire facility, both the grow operations and the processor operations. This person reports to the Chief Operations Officer, and then the management company has extensive written standard operating procedures that, in this case, is STRAINWISE Consulting. We're giving the standard operating procedures to the client, and this is what the basis for writing this and the overall structure of it. So SOPs dealing with cultivation and production, trimming, curing, and packaging, green waste, and integrated pest control. This unparalleled experience has led to the company's principals operating and consulting on over 150,000 square feet of marijuana cultivation, nearly a dozen dispensary locations, and a vibrant wholesale business within their home state. They also provide extensive guidance to prospective out-of-state operators looking to acquire the proper industry experience in their respective states to ensure success in the medical or recreational cannabis industry. It's clear at this point when we're writing this that they have partnered with STRAINWISE Consulting or a consultant like us, but what we're driving home here is the operational experience. Won the very first recreational license in the world, and we're letting the regulators know, look, the STRAINWISE Consulting is with them every step of the way. And it's highlighting a little bit of not only our experience in Colorado with our stores here, but everywhere from Puerto Rico to San Diego and in between that has a marijuana program. So we're letting them know that we're consulting other clients across the country. We have stores opening on our own, and we have cultivation facilities, processing facilities, micro business licenses, things like that, delivery services that we're helping for our clients and also for pursuing our own interests there. They're also providing extensive guidance to prospective out-of-state operators. We covered that. All right. The company requires all persons who work in direct contact with marijuana items to conform to hygienic practices while on duty, including but not limited to maintaining adequate personal cleanliness, and then washing your hands thoroughly in an adequate hand washing area before starting work, prior to having contact with marijuana item, after eating, after using restrooms, all that. Very standard stuff. We're just kind of laying the groundwork here. We will have numerous hand washing stations placed throughout the facility. We'll also mount several hand sanitizer dispensers to the walls at various locations. Our SOPs are very specific as it relates to how growers should handle medical marijuana products in a manner that prevents contamination. Team leaders will use their discretion in determining whether a sick employee should be sent home so as to prevent airborne contaminants from potentially tainting our medical marijuana products or exposing other staff. Conditions which might cause a dispensary manager to send an employee home include cold symptoms such as coughing, sneezing, running nose, nausea, vomiting, or rashes. Our SOPs prohibit any individual working on a licensed premises who has or appears to have communicable diseases, open or draining skin lesion affected with Staphylococcus aureus or Streptococcus pyogenes, or any illness accompanied by diarrhea or vomiting. I don't know what Staphylococcus aureus, it sounds like a dinosaur crossed with an STD, but it doesn't sound good. But in the event, if someone has that, you got to probably get them out of there. Obviously, diarrhea and vomiting is self-explanatory. An employee must be sent home if there is a reasonable possibility of contact with marijuana plants or medical marijuana products until the condition is corrected. All right, we will stress to all of our employees that we produce medicine for patients. Our processes must be finely tuned to respect that fact. If we're producing Tylenol or any other medicine, we would be held to exacting standards by various levels of government, and rightfully so. We must never let anyone's enthusiasm for the plant take away from the overall goal of easing the pain in people's lives. One of the things that you might see if you're looking at this webinar, other ones about how to write these applications, is that we try to find common ground and try to tie in these regulators' experience. If we know that the people that are going to be reading these have an experience in with Big Pharma on the pharmaceutical side of things, if they have experience with pharmacies, or maybe they have experience in alcohol or beverage distribution, things like that, we'll understand who our audience is and start to tailor that. In this case, just using Tylenol as an example, again, we're just drawing common ground to let them know it's not such a foreign thing. We're drawing experience from other industries and how that works. So that's an effective method of writing applications. We will grow all of our medical marijuana products ourselves and will not accept marijuana products such as clones or seeds from outside of our operations. We'll also process only our own medical marijuana products and will never accept products from outside of our own operation. These requirements specifically ensure that we do not contaminate our cultivation center facility with either mold, pest issues, or diseases. What we're conveying at this point is that we're building a facility large enough to supply our own dispensaries and our own chain that way. If we were producing developing a small cultivation center, say around 3,000 square feet or something, we would have this written differently, that we reserve the right to wholesale and find products to meet the demand other ways. In this case, we're just conveying that what we're doing is big enough to service our own market there. In addition, we will quarantine new materials used to produce medical marijuana, such as soil, pots, lights, dehumidifiers, and other equipment. We will set up a segregated portion of our bay area so that deliveries can be immediately stored while maintaining for inspection by the facility manager. The inspection will involve ensuring that packages are not damaged or torn open, specifically regarding soil and nutrients. Equipment like lights, pots, and dehumidifiers will be kept in the quarantine area until they can be wiped down with a 10% bleach solution before being implemented into the facility. All right, so quarantine of materials and equipment. In addition, we will quarantine new materials used to produce medical marijuana, such as pots, lights, dehumidifiers, and other equipment. And then the inspection will involve ensuring that packages are not opened or torn. We covered that. And then when we clone up or up-pot our plants, all equipment and work areas will first be cleaned and disinfected with a 10% bleach solution. Irrigation systems used to bring water to plants will be periodically cleaned and disinfected with a 10% bleach solution. Pots will be disinfected before being reused for new crops. Equipment such as trimming scissors and trim machines will be cleaned with alcohol at the end of each day or as needed. Flower rooms will be thoroughly cleaned after each harvest by cleaning the floors, walls, and light fixtures. All right, we'll use an integrated pest management system. So IPM, in compliance with state code there, integrated pest management as defined by Environmental Protection Agency is an effective, environmentally sensitive approach to pest management that relies on a combination of common sense practices. IPM programs use current comprehensive information on the life cycles of pests and their interaction with the environment. This information, in combination with available pest control methods, is used to manage pest damage by the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. IPM is not a single pest control method, but rather a series of pest management evaluations, decisions, and controls. Pest management is going to vary. You have your usual suspects in each grow, but it's going to vary depending on the climate, and so different situations. Like, we deal with powdery mildew in Colorado more than other states do. Right? And we have a different methodology for extinguishing that, watching out for that. We're hypersensitive to it. There are other types of mold, mildews, and pests that you might experience in your grow in certain situations that someone across the country is not going to experience. So when you add in humidity and lack thereof, and different types of conditions in the grow, you're going to have a specific pest management system for that. So in this case, it needs to be looked at based on the climate and everything that needs. If you're talking to a consultant about an integrated pest management program, it needs to make sense and just ask them questions of why. Why would you recommend this type of management system? And then your answer should be, well, because this, and this, and this environment, and this is what we're dealing with. So not uncommon to that. It should be in line from an agricultural standpoint based on what everyone else in the state is dealing with and how they're handling that. Indoor grow is going to have a little bit more sensitivity, more control, but also more sensitivity, and obviously the spread and things like that are going to be a challenge. So you're not necessarily going to be susceptible to what's going on outside outdoor grows like you would wind blowing and things like that, but it absolutely can be tracked in and can affect a grow. So just want to make sure you're covering this in its totality there. In practicing IPM, growers who are aware of the potential for pest infestation follow a 4-tiered approach. So the 4 steps include setting action thresholds, monitoring and identifying pests. You have prevention, and then you have control. So we will use a multi-tiered door system to prevent pest infestation. The doors in the grow facility, as well as those into flower and cure rooms, will be required to remain closed at all times. Pests will be inspected daily, including grow medium, stems, tops, and bottoms of leaves and flowers, to check for early warning signs of possible infestation. Sticky pads and tape will be used on both the inside and outside of all doors leading into the cultivation center, flower rooms, and cure room. In practicing IPM, growers who are aware of the potential for pest infestation follow a 4-tiered approach. We covered that. Our training manual includes pictures of different types of pest and plant illnesses and what the resulting damage looks like on plants so that it is easily recognized. Upon recognizing one of these indicators, growers will be required to report potential problems to cultivation management immediately. All new employees will be trained on this manual at hire and undergo a refresher course every 6 months. IPM continued. Diseases and pests such as powdery mildew, spider mites, and common rodents pose a real threat for any grower facility. Powdery mildew and spider mites could destroy an entire crop, whereas rodents will leave droppings that make the crop unsafe and unethical to use. Very, very important that you have internal controls set up for what your standards are, and just understand that on some of the smaller grows and the less capitalized organizations are going to feel pressure to get that crop out, whereas others that are very organized, well funded, and well thought out are going to have a higher standard of their product, and they're going to work, and they're going to have the environment to work in a more ethical way. I'm not saying that these guys that are cash strapped are acting in unethical ways. I'm just telling you that the incentive is there for them to cut corners and things like that. So we're just signaling to the regulators at this point that we're going to have our own internal controls that are above and beyond what the state will require. Powdery mildew is controlled via consistent and appropriate temperature and humidity. There are several business entities in the medical marijuana market providing integrated systems which monitor the environment conditions in grow facilities. We will contract with one of them, such as Nanolux's cloud control system, to install a system which will monitor, record, and regulate temperature, humidity, ventilation, CO2, pH, and nutrient control, water drips, and of course lighting. At the heart of the system is a software program which allows us to specify all the parameters in each flower room. All right. Got that? All right, powdery mildew is controlled via consistent and appropriate temperature and humidity. We covered that. It controls all of the selected functions through a wireless modem communication. The process involves installing sensors with each thermostat, humidistat, ventilation duct, fan, and lighting control panel. The service provider will monitor the integrated system remotely and will notify the facility manager if any of the components behave outside of agreed upon parameters. Automation, you're going to have automation at some level in your grow, if not everything that's automated. At the very least, you're going to have irrigation, watering, and then hopefully everything else is being monitored like that. You'll see very few grows of substantial size that are not fully automated at this point. So pest management, no different. Once present, spider mites can only be eradicated through pesticides or predatory insects such as ladybugs. Rodents are kept away through a combination of facility maintenance and general cleanliness. We have installed screens on each ventilation duct entering our facility with a screen fine enough to exclude most plant pests. In addition, we will install doors to each room that will remain closed to prevent cross-contamination. Doors in the facility will also be required to remain closed to prevent pests from entering the cultivation facility. Water supply. We will have an adequate water supply in compliance with state code there. Water will come into the facility from the local municipality. We can access the water quality area data from their website. We will filter the water through ceramic and charcoal canister style water filter systems in order to remove any softeners, chlorine, or fluoride, so that we will start our nutrient process with a blank slate. One of the things you'll see that's a common mistake, I don't know if it's people are in a hurry or they're maybe overlooking this, but they're not testing the water before. You have to know where your starting point is, just like you need to test the soil that's coming into your grow. So you need to know where your starting point is before you can recommend any treatment. So education is the key here, in knowing what the pH levels are in the water and what the chemical content is. Chlorine, you need to see if there's softeners in there. Most likely there are. So we need to figure out what's going on with that water and then make sure it's appropriate to come into the grow. After filtering, we will test the water, determine the pH level, add nutrients as needed, and then test the water again. Very, very important. We will use 2 instruments to help test the water quality before feeding it to our plants. The electrical conductivity meter measures total dissolvable solids, which is the best measurement of the nutrient concentration of a hydroponic solution. The TDS is measured via ppm, parts per million, of course, of the water should be between 650 and 750 and varies depending on the flower cycle of the plant. The pH meter measures the pH level and should be between 5.8 and 6.0. Okay, next up we're going to discuss indoor air quality. Indoor air quality describes the air quality within buildings. So our employees will work primarily indoors, so we will pay specific attention to our grow facilities' air quality. Health effects from some indoor air pollutants may be experienced quickly after exposure, whereas some pollutants bioaccumulate and are experienced much later. Workers in the grow facility may encounter ozone as a byproduct of the chemical reaction of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. Example, terpenes emitted from the marijuana plant. Nitrogen oxide may enter the facility as well, depending on a variety of factors. Terpenes and nitric oxides are associated with eye, skin, and mucus irritation. Ozone generators may also be found in some grow facilities for odor control. Ozone can cause decreased lung function and, depending on the individual, can exacerbate pre-existing health conditions including asthma. We will not use ozone due to this potential risk and will instead employ activated carbon and charcoal filtration. This system not only lessens the health risk for our employees, but it also reduces the smell frequently found around some medical marijuana grow facilities. Indoor air quality continued. Indoor air quality will be controlled by an HVAC system that is large enough and robust enough to handle the challenge of an indoor grow facility. In addition, we will provide appropriate ventilation wherever chemicals are used. Respirators will be provided for employees whenever they work with chemicals. Respirators are covered in more depth in the next section. Employees will also wear gloves whenever handling medical marijuana as required by the state code. This helps prevent cross-contamination. Dust masks are used by employees when handling grow medium and when trimming buds. So under hygiene and protective clothing, in both instances, dust is often generated, which can trigger allergic reactions or respiratory issues. Employees will also wear foot coverings to ensure they are not tracking pests or other contaminants from the outside. We provide a separated changing area, further ensuring the quarantine of any potential pest or mold issues from entering the grow areas of our facility. Employees will be required to wear a uniform when they are working in our facility, and this will be provided to them at no cost. When employees enter the building, they will go in a changing area immediately before proceeding to any veg or flower rooms. Hygiene and protective clothing is very, very important in states where you're allowed to grow at home, 6 plants or somewhere along those lines, depending on what your limitations are, depending on what your medical card allows you to do. The chances are some of our people in the cultivation center are going to be growing at home if they're allowed to do that. So what they're bringing in from home doesn't need to be introduced into the grow, and that can be problematic. So very easy to maintain a small plant count at home, and you can do a lot of different things, experiment with nutrient programs and other things. When you get into the commercial side of things, a whole different animal altogether. So we want to make sure that they're not tracking in things from their own grow. Not that they would be visiting other grows. It's not likely they're working for multiple grows, but how you enter that building and how that layout is done. If a consultant is laying out the floor plan for you and you've got this, one of the first things you want to look at is entrance into the facility for both employees and deliveries and ingress, egress, and it starts from just entering the facility as a whole, and then foot traffic when you actually get to the door, how you handle that sanitation and how that works. If you're looking for something more than just a changing area, I definitely recommend that. Some of the more high-tech grows you'll see where they're completely, they go through a area where they're just, everything's blown, all the dust particles, everything's blown completely out and completely sanitized, and they're covered from head to foot basically. Not uncommon to see things start to trend that way. Before starting work, employees must change from their day clothes into scrub-like uniform. The uniform will be a neutral color and will have long sleeves and long pants, so that will also protect the skin from UV exposure. I feel like we could do a webinar on its own about UV exposure. I wish some of the manufacturers of lights would start to produce this data. We have some of it on our own from our experience. We've been doing this since 2009. So, but understand that UV exposure is a big deal, and protecting your employees under the lights is something that needs to be discussed immediately. If you're working for a grow and they're not talking about how to protect you from that, that should be a red flag for you, because there's enough data and enough concern that the environment, it can be hazardous as to eyes and skin and others. So At the end of their shifts, employees will change back into their day clothes and leave their uniforms on site to be laundered. This procedure helps prevent contamination. If, for example, an employee sprayed pesticides on their garden or lawn before coming to work, this procedure will prevent the spread of those pesticides onto our medical marijuana plants. For more information about our nutrient practices, please see section 18. So that's another part of this application. We're not going to go into that on this webinar. Hygiene and protective clothing continue. Employees are expected to groom themselves in accordance with acceptable social and business standards. If the facility manager decides an employee's standard of grooming is so poor that he risks contaminating the plants, that employee will be asked to leave the facility until properly groomed. Employees who come to the facility sick might be asked to take the day off at the discretion of the facility manager. All right, our IPM, integrated pest management materials, must be handled as hazardous chemicals with the utmost attention to personal safety. So you have personal protective equipment, we'll call it PPE, such as a respirator, goggles, gloves. You have a personal eye wash, and a spray suit is required. The spray suit is inspected for rips or tears before each application and replaced after 6 uses. At least 2 people are present during each IPM application, integrated pest management application, to allow for immediate aid in the event that one of the applicators encounters problems during or after the application. Eye wash stations are made available in several locations of the facility, and personal eye wash bottles are carried by all applicators. Foliators, which are IPM sprayers, will only be administered by certified employees who have completed respirator safety training and have received a medical evaluation regarding respirator use. All right, before IPM application signs are put up on all doors leading into the flower room being sprayed, indicating that IPM is in process of being sprayed and that no one may enter the room. Very common for rooms to be closed off completely and shut down, especially if you're getting behind in cycles, behind in harvest. You might have the lights out for specific reasons and off limits to certain flower rooms. So not uncommon to have communicative signs outside these rooms about what's going on, and during the IPM application, of course, that sign will be up. These signs remain on the door for at least 3 hours after IPM application or for interval prescribed by the chemicals manufacturer. One of the things when we get asked to go into grows and look at things, the first thing that we'll notice is that, the communication and the boards and what's going on in that room, you should be able to see that either by a screen or on a board, and it should be consistent. And there's a lot of inconsistency there, and frankly, you'll go in there and you'll just see, okay, who updated that last and why did this happen? So communication needs to be there. Imagine people getting sick and not being able to come into work one day. Everything needs to run smoothly. It's more like a manufacturing plant than you would just a personal garden, and that's a big switch for people sometimes in the cannabis industry. It's very common for them to have resistance to that sort of understanding that we're running a manufacturing plant here, more so than just a small garden. As new chemicals are made available for use, a new SDS is added to the SDS binder. And all chemicals used to treat plants at the grow facility are required to have proper labeling attached to them at all times, identifying the ingredients and instructions for use displayed in any easy-to-read format. Under no circumstances is any IPM product used if the container is unmarked or the label cannot be read. Chemical containers are kept clean from drips and spills and are routinely checked to ensure the container has no cracks or leaks. Chemicals may be stored together with the exception of bleach and ammonia, which must be segregated from each other. All chemicals must be disposed of in accordance with federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations. Hygiene and protective clothing continued. So because of the manual nature of many of the activities associated with growing and processing medical marijuana, protection of the hands is a requirement. A variety of gloves exist that can protect against dermal contact from compounds that could irritate, sensitize, puncture, or cut the skin. Specific work processes and practices that may necessitate the use of gloves include, but are not limited to, pesticide mixing and application, manual trimming of medical marijuana, automated trimming of medical marijuana, cleaning processes, harvesting, defanning, uppotting, and destemming. All right, extraction rooms are maintained similar to commercial kitchens and are cleaned repeatedly throughout the day. After each extraction run, equipment and work areas are to be cleaned with isopropyl alcohol. The floors will be swept several times a day and mopped at least once a day. Tables and countertops will also be cleaned with isopropyl alcohol several times a day. So assuming that you're running a grow that's going to have, you're going to take down the entire room at one time, There are situations, of course, where you're taking down, half the room or a portion of the room, depending on the size of your grow. But there's always a clean in between these harvests, and obviously that becomes much more complicated if you're taking down a room in different stages. But if you're going to take out that whole room, cleaning that is a no-brainer. But on the extraction side of things is what we're talking about in this particular slide. On the extraction side, that needs to be as clean as it's spotless. So extraction expectations in that type of environment, there's just no leeway for it being unclean. So keep that in mind. All right. All employees or anyone who enters the lab, an extraction lab, will be expected to wash their hands before entering. If an employee uses the restroom or leaves the lab for any reason, she'll be expected to wash her hands upon returning. This prevents contamination. Additionally, hand sanitizer pumps will be placed at several points in the laboratory, and employees are encouraged to use them as often as reasonably possible. Several trash cans will be placed within the laboratory, and they will be emptied and replaced daily or more often if needed. Marijuana waste may not be placed within these containers. Marijuana waste is considered green waste and must be placed in an appropriate bin. For more information about our waste management plan, please see section 15 of this application. All right. Cleanliness is monitored by checklist. Each room has its own checklist, and each employee is responsible for completing items on a checklist. The checklists are monitored, collected, and replaced by a facility manager. Tasks include cleaning countertops and surfaces multiple times a day, cleaning floors, equipment, and tools daily, cleaning fans and ventilation ducts weekly, and cleaning rooms after each extraction run. So any issues are reported to the facility manager as soon as they are discovered so that they can be rectified in a timely manner. Checklists and records of all sanitation processes and chemicals used are maintained for 2 years pursuant to our records retention policies and can be made available upon request. For more information on this, check our record-keeping practices, which is section 22 of this application. All right, so respirators are next, guys. Workers in a grow facility are encouraged to wear respirators during certain activities, including while trimming, during any activity that generates dust, and also while spraying or mixing pesticides. OSHA requires that in any workplace where respirators are necessary to protect the health of the employee, or whenever respirators are required by the employer shall establish and implement a written respiratory protection program with worksite specific procedures. All right, this program must be updated as necessary to reflect those changes in workplace conditions that affect respirator use. The written respiratory protection program includes several important details, but first and foremost, it must detail workplace-specific tasks and hazards for which respirators use is required. All right, there must be a designated program administrator who is suitably trained to administer the respiratory protection program. Examples of qualified program administrators include safety professionals, industrial hygienists, and occupational health nurses. Our company will contract with a nationally recognized company that provides services to help other businesses comply with OSHA and other safety standards. The company can provide on-site training and fit testing for respirators, and training also covers proper selection, medical clearance, fitting and inspection of respirators, as well as qualitative and quantitative fit testing. All respirators must be certified by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. For those employees who will be mixing chemicals or pesticides as well, we will supply a respirator that provides eye protection as well. Employees with facial hair should not wear tight-fitting respirators because the facial hair will prevent a protective seal from forming and render the respirator less effective. Respirators must be fit tested prior to initial use in order to be sure that the respirator fits and seals properly. For equipment calibration, we have a number of highly technical machines in our laboratory. In order to ensure that all equipment is routinely calibrated by a calibration laboratory accredited to ISO IEC 17025, we will contract with a qualified service provider in compliance with state code. Calibration checks and routine maintenance will be performed no less than every 6 months or more often if needed. I can tell you more often if needed. Records of maintenance will be stored pursuant to our records retention policy. For more information on record keeping, check another section of this application. All right, so a workplace-related injury, how we're going to handle that. So employees in any industry are susceptible to injury, which could be anything from slips, trips, falls, lower back strains, asthma attacks, or even heart attacks. Some of these injuries will need to be treated immediately using first aid. Other injuries may require CPR or the use of an automated external defibrillator. All right, these tools and techniques can help reduce the long-term severity of an injury by providing temporary treatment until professional medical help can be obtained. Our grow facility is located approximately 3.5 miles from the nearest hospital. In the event of a severe injury, someone will be able to drive the afflicted worker to the hospital with minimal time lost. All right, workplace-related injuries continued. There are also several urgent care treatment centers in the area, but none of them are as close as the hospital. Despite our close proximity to a well-funded, well-equipped hospital, we plan to have an AED in a prominent location, as well as several first aid kits placed strategically around the building. Our COO, our Director of Security, and our Facilities Manager have all taken past first aid classes. All of them, and possibly a few additional people, will receive first aid, CPR, and AED training from the Red Cross prior to the commencement of the operations. Refresher courses will be offered to employees every 12 months. All right, lighting hazards. Metal halide lights, which are often used in bedrooms, contain an inner arc tube that is similar to a welder's arc. The arc emits intense ultraviolet radiation, UV radiation, along with visible light. Normally, the outer glass bulb reduces the UV radiation to nominal levels, but if the outer bulb is broken, UV levels can be significant enough to cause photokeratitis. Photokeratitis is a painful eye condition that occurs when the eyes are exposed to UV rays, either from the sun or from a man-made source. Symptoms which include tearing, blurring vision, and the feeling of a foreign body in the eye, normally peak 6 to 12 hours after exposure. So, kind of like a welding accident. When you look at when you're watching that, it might burn your eyes. You may not feel it or notice it until later in the day, several hours later. So, to prevent this, broken metal halide lights should be immediately removed from service. UV lamps can be useful germicidal tools, as well as metal halide lights. Exposure to UV radiation from these lamps can cause extreme discomfort and serious injury. The effect of UV radiation overexposure depends on UV intensity, wavelength, portion of body exposed, and sensitivity of the individual. There's a lot of supplemental lighting going on in grows to counter powdery mildew and others. And so those lights are often fluorescent lights put in there, mixed in with lighting. So understand the intensity of that and what's happening, and the UV exposure there to your employees. Very, very important, and just ethical to go above and beyond. Overexposure to the eyes may produce painful inflammation, a gritty sensation, or tears within 3 to 12 hours. Overexposure to the skin may produce reddening, sunburn within 1 to 8 hours. Certain medications can also cause an individual to be more sensitive to UV light, like certain antibiotics and acne medications, things like that. So you want to be aware that you're doing the due diligence there and working with your employees to make sure that they're in the best possible protection that they can possibly have there. Fluorescent lights may also be used in marijuana cultivation facilities. Health hazards with fluorescent bulbs are present when a fluorescent bulb breaks. The hazard is from metals such as lead and, most importantly, mercury. Broken bulbs can release mercury vapors, causing exposure to employees in the area of the broken lamp. The central air or heating will be turned off. Broken bulbs should never be vacuumed, because doing so may spread mercury and other harmful contaminants. Large pieces of broken glass can be swept, while smaller pieces can be collected with any flexible adhesive surface like duct tape. Employees will be provided industry-specific sunglasses and required to wear them while working near any intense lighting. Also, personal protective equipment, including respirators, protective clothing, spray suits, goggles, and protective eyewear, will be inspected once per month in order to comply with federal safety regulations. These items must be inspected for more frequency if needed, or if a problem is brought to the attention of a manager. All other cultivation equipment, including but not limited to lights, fans, tables, buckets, and hoses, will be inspected at the end of every harvest. Any equipment that is broken or damaged will either be fixed or replaced before it is used again. No employee will ever be asked to work without PPE or with PPE that is clearly unsuitable for its function. All right, compressed gases is next. And all right. We intend to use supercritical CO2 as the solvent in our extraction process. All compressed gases are hazardous because of the high pressure inside the cylinders. Most cylinders have safety relief devices. These devices can prevent rupture of the cylinder if internal pressure builds up to excess levels exceeding the design limits. However, gas can be released deliberately by opening the cylinder valve, or accidentally from a broken or leaking valve, or from a safety device. There have been many cases in which cylinders have become uncontrollable rockets or pinwheels and have caused severe injury and damage. In addition, pressure can become dangerously high if a cylinder is exposed to fire or heat, including high storage temperatures. Compressed gas continued. In order to mitigate the threat created by storing compressed gases, we will ensure the safety data sheets are available for the gases at our facility. A safety data sheet is a communication tool created by OSHA that conveys the properties of each chemical, the physical, health, and environmental health hazards, protective measures, and safety precautions for handling, storing, and transporting the chemical. All canisters must be stored upright and immobilized by chains or other mechanisms to prevent them from falling over. When they are not in use, cylinder caps will be firmly in place. Lastly, all CO2 cylinders will have at least one safety relief device. Okay, for emergencies such as fires and natural disasters can be a hazard in your workplace. The most important aspect of preparation is ensuring prevention programs are put into place. Facilities need to have an emergency action plan as required by OSHA. Our EAP clearly establishes employee roles and responsibilities, evacuation routes, and meeting locations during an emergency. Routine fire department inspections will help ensure compliance with fire extinguishing and sprinkling facility code requirements. It is essential to know where fire suppressant systems are located and how to use fire extinguishers. Natural disasters such as tornadoes and potential workplace violence situations such as active shooter situations are also covered in our emergency action plan. All right, so that covers what we would put into a sanitary facilities plan. And that is just a quick rundown of everything that's in that application and how to write those different narratives. I want to add as an additional bonus here, I want to talk about the 5 OSHA infractions for cannabis businesses. The top 5 infractions for cannabis businesses. So even though marijuana businesses are not federally supported, they still must adhere and comply to all federal laws and regulations for protecting their employees. Under the Occupational Safety and Health Law, employees have a responsibility and obligation to provide employers have a responsibility and obligation to provide a safe workplace. So the Occupational Safety and Hazard Administration, OSHA, is now very active in Colorado and other states where marijuana is legally sold. As many marijuana businesses have grown rapidly and mostly unchecked, compliance with OSHA is critical for marijuana business to survive. So fines and citations proposed from OSHA are usually significant and can often impact closed down businesses that are unable to absorb a financial impact. So here are the top 5 infractions observed via the adherence score here. The first one is that the facility does not have a written hazardous communication plan that describes how it achieves compliance with labels on hazardous containers, and hazardous chemical training for employees is also another one. All relevant employees have not been trained on hazardous material in use at the facility prior to their initial work assigned, and when new hazards are introduced and documented as required. So making sure that the training program is ongoing. OSHA can come in and say who's been trained, who hasn't. That's a red flag, and that's certainly an infraction that's common in the cannabis industry. Third, the facility does not have required OSHA documentation related to workplace injury. OSHA Form 300 or Form 301 if injuries have occurred. You got to have that on file. Also, there are displays that need to be put up in every facility. The facility does not have a formal fire prevention plan is another big mistake. You need a written one with more than 10 employees. You need a formal fire prevention plan that addresses major hazards in the facility, accumulation of waste material, maintenance of heat-producing equipment, names and titles of employees responsible for various parts of the plan. So if you don't have that plan in place, that's going to be a violation for you. Another one is you required personal protective equipment has not been evaluated and documented along with associated training plans and verification for employees. So just having some of it, this is more on the implementation side, and it's very easy for cultivators to be overwhelmed with so many things that need to happen. But staying in compliance is something that you need to be consulted on. It needs to be something that's worth paying to have that service and have somebody minding your business. Because you're going to find that, and most of our clients find this pretty quickly as we're writing the application for them, they start to understand all the things that go into running this business. We spell it out for them, and we allow them to choose how they would like to help us to participate in that and have us help them through it. Various levels, there's often a custom solution. A lot of people end up going, oh my gosh, I want you to handle everything, and I want to focus on making the contacts and selling cannabis and getting the business side and the fun things done. I want all the compliance things handled by somebody. But one of the things, and you can kind of see the overarching theme of all of these 5 OSHA infractions, is that someone's just not paying attention, or maybe they've gotten halfway through, they have the equipment in the facility, but they're not using the implementation part of it. They're not educating their employees and allowing them access to it and then requiring them to follow through. So a lot of this is enforcement implementation stuff. All right, so here's some recent fines that have been and citations that are proposed by OSHA. So once OSHA becomes involved in an incident, the facility can be expected to have repeated inspections from the agency for the foreseeable future. You should plan for inspections all the time. When you start looking at holding licenses and things like that, and you start looking at the long lists, ever-growing list of departments that you're beholden to, you should expect inspections, and you should have a relationship with those inspectors and make it easy for them and let them allow you to develop a reputation in the industry to go, oh, okay, this is great, this is STRAINWISE. We're gonna, these inspections are gonna be easy. They always do this. Or, they could be saying something different. They could say XYZ Grow is missing, this, and they're difficult to deal with. Human beings are doing these inspections, and so you shouldn't be hiding from this. You should bring it in as part of your job. So ensuring strong compliance and an effective hazard communication plan up front is a big deal, along with documented training processes can save a business hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, compliance, and legal costs. Our compliance management is very inexpensive compared to any fine whatsoever. When you start to look at that and you start looking at that line item, it's worth it for sure. When you start to compare that. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they get into this business, they don't understand what the fines are and what the cost is. Being shut down and being out of compliance, you can lose your entire harvest. If you're shut down for 5 days, everyone inside a grow understands that can kill a harvest, and an unsuccessful harvest can kill a business, and it often does. Another thing that the infractions that come up is people fail to guard electrical devices, providing standard railing and handrails, lack of effective hazard communication plan, exposing employees to electrical risk, and allowing buildup of combustible materials can be anywhere from $215,000 and more. That can be the fine that you're going to pay. Investigated fire at the facility. If you fail to maintain fire extinguishers, that can be an $87,000 fine. If you've got blocked exits and exit routes where fire extinguishers located are not marked and electrical panels are blocked, that can be a $156,000 fine there. Also, if you fail to report employee illness, exposure of workers to infectious bacteria, failure to comply with OSHA Form 301 can result in a $1.9 million fine. Here's a report that shows failure to provide requested for 4 businesses. They paid almost $2 million in fines for that. So you want to avoid that. All right, so once citations from OSHA are received, businesses have 15 days to comply and may be called to an independent OSHA review commission meeting. So the question begs, how can you prepare? The most viable low-cost option is to hire a reputable third-party compliance inspection company to review overall compliance and support for your internal team. The process should be automated and provide a detailed compliance report to track and monitor areas of compliance. Additionally, businesses should strive to comply with record-keeping, reporting, and poster requirements. Any areas where the items are missing or lacking usual requirements, a deeper inspection where additional infractions may be uncovered. So what the theme here also is with OSHA, one infraction often leads to another infraction. OSHA does offer an on-site consultation program for free and confidential safety and occupational health advice to small and medium-sized businesses in all states across the country. We invite you to get OSHA involved during the construction process. This is a compliment. We've found that success in states across the country when we start with this design and build out phase of bringing in all the inspectors, welcoming everybody. We look at this situation and we ask ourselves, what does a typical marijuana cultivator do? We want to do the opposite of that, right? We want to say, okay, most of the time they're very secretive. They're coming from a gray market or a black market, and they haven't got it wrapped around their head yet that they're legal, and so their old habits they die hard there. So being even mistrust or any of those things is just really no place for in the market, in a mature marijuana market that we experience today. There's really no excuse for it. So you want to bring in all those people, inspectors and otherwise, during the construction process. That works on the building side. It works on the compliance side. It works. Start developing those relationships, and also understand it is a relationship. Whether you want it to be or not, you're going to have a relationship with these inspectors, and you might as well make it a great, productive one. Reducing workplace injuries and illnesses can help improve your bottom line, of course. Get ahead of the common compliance curve in marijuana and prepare for all federal, state, county, and city regulatory inspectors as soon as possible. Your business depends on it. All right, guys, that is a wrap on this. For those of you who have sat through this, I want to offer you a free hour of consultation. So send me an email with, here's my contact information here, subanks@strainwise.com. In the subject line, put 1 hour free, and I'm happy to sit there and talk to you about what's going on in your state, and I look forward to that conversation. I want to thank you all for joining us. Please stay tuned to our YouTube channel, STRAINWISE Consulting. Also, our podcast, bluntbusinessradio.com. There's so much content that we're creating out there. If you're interested in sponsoring one of these webinars or our podcast, please reach out to us. We're happy to give you that exposure, talk about you, and as long as it's an intelligent conversation and it's relevant to moving our clients' businesses forward, or our listeners, it's helpful information from there on the business side of marijuana, we're happy to have those conversations.